Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today, we've got one of my close friends who is an absolute firecracker when it comes to women's health. Please welcome Laura Morel, known as Laura Morel Wellness on Instagram. Laura and I actually connected after attending a course together a few years back now. And since then, we've become closer and we've been pretty much like, helping one another out whenever's needed. Before we dive into today's chat, could you please tell our listeners a summary of who you are and what exactly it is that you do?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for having me on. And I love the way you explained how we met, because it was just like at a course, like-minded people, and we just like kept that connection going. And here we are today helping each other. So I love that. So I'm so happy to be here with you. So my name is Laura Morel and I'm an online functional health coach. And the reason I say functional, because I practice what's called more functional medicine. So it means we identify more about the core issues with women's health. So for example, it will be if you have a health issue, we identify the core issue of the health, or if you're in the midst of a binge eating, for example, we identify the core issue of the binge eating. So it's really about identifying to find the right solution for you and taking into consideration everyone's different. And I created my business because I felt there was such a gap, and I noticed this gap when I was going through my own health journey, which I know we sort of had similar experiences. So I kind of grew up very healthy. So I was a very fit teenager. I was always health conscious. And then I kind of fell into the competing days very early. So my first one when I was about 18, 19, and that sort of gravitated and pulled me into this vortex of the diet culture. And I learned quite quickly at an early age just how toxic the diet culture can be. And it did hit me to like a rock bottom where I was down to like 900 calories. I lost my menstrual cycle. I got diagnosed with PCOS, and everything happened at once. It was like binge eating, PCOS, and all these health conditions just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I knew at that moment, this would have been maybe at 23, 24, I was like, I just can't continue being in this all or nothing cycle. And I know so many people listening understands what that cycle's like, because it's like when you're on, you are good. But then when you're off, it is like a pit of depression, just waiting for that motivation to pull you out of this hole. And it got to that point where I was like, yeah, no, I'm done. So I started my recovery journey, and it started with reverse dieting, but I noticed there were lots of gaps in my recovery. So, I'd work with a PT, which is amazing, but then I couldn't get the psychological aspect of the food behaviors and my mindset around, a lot of things. So then it's like I needed the psychological help. But then with the psychological help, there was a big gap in learning about nutrition because I didn't know how to fuel myself correctly. So that sort of cascaded a binge eating cycle. And it was very hard to recover, knowing I needed so many different sort of specialists to be able to piece something together. So it was more a holistic recovery. And that's why I've created Laura Morel Wellness, because I did want it to be a very holistic view where we don't just focus on what I call like bottoms up, which is just nutrition, education around sleep, but very much like a top-down approach. So your thoughts, cognitive behavior, because again, what we think is how we feel, is how we act, behave, and then that's our identity. And then there's the outside-in approach as well, which is like our support network, our education. So I created the business so women can get that holistic view for recovery, learn how to eat, understand binge eating, understand their core issues of health. And this is where I am today.
So good. I love everything about that. And it's very similar to how I run my business as well. Understanding what the client is suffering with and identifying the exact cause root. And very similar to your experience is, we were doing all the right things in quotation, but yet not seeing the results that we wanted. Or, during those competition years, you're constantly starving yourself or depleted with energy, but can't bounce out of that. And hence why the binge eating starts from there, or any other body dysmorphia issues arise there. Let's talk a little bit more about identifying the root cause. What are some steps that you would take when a client, let's talk about binge eating for our listeners. What are some steps that you would take to help a client identify the root cause of it?
So there's a difference between, for example, triggers and causes. So, I love that there is awareness on social media about binge eating, but at the same time, it can be more detrimental than it is helpful, because we have all these things such as, brush your teeth, get outside, distract yourself, go for a walk. And unfortunately, they treat all the triggers, but you're still ignoring the root cause. So the root cause of something is really identifying why we have the symptom of binge eating, because at the end of the day, something like binge eating is a symptom of something going on that's deeper. Now, with binge eating, there's so many different causes for women, and everybody is so different. So that's why it is a very tailored approach. We can't sort of just scroll on social media and look for top tips and overcome. We can't DIY social media can't DIY binge eating, in other words. And I think that's really important to know, because if you DIY it, it can be a bit of a Band-Aid solution. And of course, that means we can get a rebound effect if that Band-Aid tends to come off. So, if a new client comes to me and they do have binge eating, it is, and I'm very honest with this with my clients, you are not going to be healed in the first 6 weeks. It takes time, because I need the triggers to come out. We need to identify what is going on. So, for example, just to give you a few examples of root causes of binge eating, common ones which we know of, such as restriction. So this is a really environmental common one that we can control. So if we do restrict food because we are trying to lose weight, that can then cause binge eating because of some biological, biochemical effects on the body, not getting enough calories, and your body. And this is one thing I think is so important. Your brain is so much smarter than you. You cannot control your brain. Do not try and outsmart it by keep restricting calories when you're binge eating, because you cannot control it. Your body's screaming for calories, and it will scream louder and louder and give you more binges until you stop and listen. So restriction is a big one, but then it's about identifying, why are we restricting? And a lot of the time it is because we want the quick fix. Why do we want the quick fix? So think of me as that kid that's always like, but why, but why, but why? And this is how we dig our, I am the queen.
I used to be that kid.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. Imagine the conversations we would have been like as kids.
Why, Mum? Why? How? What?
Yeah,
what?
Why?
Why? Yeah. Tell me more. Why?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine as kids hanging out, just sitting there, go, but why? But why? And I think it's really important for a practitioner to have that mindset, because we need to identify, why do you want the quick fix? And a lot of that comes down to self-love. It comes down to the perception of ourselves. It comes down to how the world sees us. And that's just one cause. And then you have other things, for example, like, cravings. People can't control cravings. And this is to do with your gut microbiome. And a lot of the time we get cravings because our body actually needs essential fatty acids and amino acids. But if we're not giving the body amino acids or essential fatty acids, it can send a craving of sugar. So we consume sugar, and that gives us a temporary fix. But then the gut bacteria is like, oh, yeah, no, not satisfied because I didn't get my EFAs and amino acids. So then it will scream louder, and then you want more sugar. Yeah, but what we really need is to learn about nutrition and education, making sure we're getting our amino acids through protein, making sure we're getting our EFAs through good sources of fats in order to overcome that binge eating. So that's another sort of biochemical aspect. And then we've got more, what's the best way to explain it? psychological aspects of dieting and psychological aspects of it. So it can become habitual. And this is a key thing. A lot of the time we've had a really stressful day, because stress is another really big cause of binge eating. And if we've had that really big stressful day, at the end of the day is generally when women will tend to overeat and go into that sort of binge eating, because their body's trying to deal with the stress the best way it knows how, through food, because that's distraction, but also serotonin through sugary glucose and things like that. But then if we repeat that enough times, it then becomes a formed habit in the brain. So then we're not only dealing with having to manage the stress, now we have to deal with trying to change the habits we've formed. And again, when we create habits, and this is something I love talking about, when we create habits, it goes into, you create a really strong network, and the neurons just fire together quickly. And then it goes into a part of the brain called the striatum. And the striatum houses our subconscious. And we run on 95% subconscious. So again, when it comes to binge eating, it's like, I like to think of the striatum as a house, and inside that house is all our default behaviors. What behaviors are contributing to binge eating that's housed in that striatum that we need to change? So again, that's just 3 examples of various causes of binge eating. And it can go much deeper as well, because you've got trauma, then you've got, so much experiences with binge eating that you need to overcome. So it can go even deeper than that. But they're sort of the 3 main types of trying to identify the causes of binge eating.
I'm like nodding my head here, and I'm like, yeah, been there, been done, done that. Yeah. And I love the fact that you mentioned also regarding habits, and also about the subconscious and a conscious mind, because I don't know if many of our listeners understand, but our thinking process and the habits that we do create over time comes from your subconscious mind, which again, like you said, it's 95% of what you do every day. Conscious mind is such a small part of what you do, and the continuous part of you repeating every action is what you do every day till, from the age, actually it starts from the womb, from before even birth, you're already starting to create these habits from what your mum used to do, and then you do that as a kid, and then from a kid into a teenager, into an adult. So I love the fact that you dig really deep into the triggers of your client regarding binge eating, or whether it's something completely different, to have them understand that, hey, this is just a symptom. It's not like a cause that's just happened right now. It's a repetition of what you've been doing. I think that's really fascinating, because not many people speak about the brain as much as you do, and as much as we love talking about mindset to a client. There was a Instagram post you did not long ago. You were talking about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and I loved you used the analogy of correct me if I'm wrong, but the gas pedal and the brakes.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that? I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah. So we have a part of the brain, part of our body that controls our stress. And it's really important to understand this mechanism, because stress is not bad. I'll talk about the 2 aspects in a moment, but I think we demonize cortisol, we demonize the fight-flight response. But I guess what I'm trying to educate women is, it's not all bad to be in fight or flight, because even though we're stressed, that can mimic positive things like excitement, or seeing someone you haven't seen in a while that you're really excited. Think about the guy you haven't seen in a while and you want to see them, heart rate gets higher. So there is good, but there's also, in today's world, we are on overdrive with stress, and I think this is where the issue comes from. So we have what's called the autonomic nervous system. And I like to think of that as a branch. And then underneath that branch, we have 2 other branches, and we are continuously, and then you're going to understand my analogies, but I use a lot of wacky analogies, because then I imagine a monkey swinging from one to the other. So I want you to imagine a branch and then two branches coming off that, and then you've got a monkey swinging from one branch to the other. Now, when that monkey goes into, say, for example, they've got a project they need to deliver, or they've got a presentation they need to deliver, or they've just got some shocking news, your monkey goes into the sympathetic state, and that's kind of the gas pedal for your fight or flight response. And in that particular instance, your heart rate will increase, you'll start to sweat more, blood flow goes from digestion into your arms and legs. And it's important to understand this because if we don't have the blood flow to support digestion, our digestion becomes downregulated. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But we have all these physiological reactions that happen so quickly without our knowledge. We don't realize our senses heighten. So, for example, a few weeks ago, I got some bad news in my family, and the monkey swung into that sympathetic state. So all of a sudden my heart rate started increasing. I kept peeing like 5 times in the hour, and I looked at Bill and I was like, I can't stop peeing. And I looked at him like, I'm in acute stress state right now. He's like, babe, stop analyzing your body. But I could hear Brody in his room, and I could hear my senses were so heightened, so I could hear what he was doing in his room, whereas normally I wouldn't. So that's an example of my body swinging into that sympathetic. So I'm pushing that gas pedal on the cortisol. Now, once that stress is done, so for example, your project's over, you've stopped arguing with your partner, whatever your stress is, the monkey is meant to swing back to the parasympathetic state, which means we go back into rest and digest our cortisol. So the cortisol gets produced from your adrenals, and the adrenals sit on your kidneys. And this is why you will pee more or get lower back pain when you're stressed. So when that cortisol comes up, it swims back up to the brain. So now I imagine cortisol is like a cortisol fish. Again, my analogies, but it goes back to the brain. And it's like, yep, stress is done. I'm all sweet. We survived the lecture. We survived the presentation, and it turns that cortisol tap off. Then we swing back into parasympathetic state. Blood flow goes back to your digestion. Your heart rate decreases, and you're back in rest and digest. And that's where we want to be majority of the time. However, think about today's day and age. Everything is a stressor. And I think it's important to understand we have over 100 triggers of stress. It's not just, fighting with a partner or work. It's gluten, dairy, it's soy, it's under eating is probably one of the biggest stresses. It's chronic dieting, it's psycho-spiritual. So how do you see yourself? Are you looking in the mirror thinking you're fat? Is it that constant chatter in your mind that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not skinny enough? Because all of that swings that monkey to the sympathetic state, because your brain can't tell the difference by a thought or an action. So if I'm thinking I'm fat, it's the same as me running on the road in front of a car, gonna hit that gas pedal. So I think the first thing to take away from this is learn the concept of the monkey, that we want to be on that parasympathetic state, but also become self-aware of your thoughts and how are you putting that gas pedal on throughout the day as well.
So important that you mentioned about the thoughts, because I come across so many women, especially clients or even friends, can speak from my experience as well, that I used to speak really badly about myself or think really negative thoughts. And even though we don't perceive it as a stressful state, your body doesn't know, well, your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're thinking and what you're doing. It perceives it as its reality. So if you're constantly feeding that negative emotion or those negative thoughts, like you mentioned, looking yourself in the mirror and being like, oh, I'm fat, oh, this, that, it's just going to cause more stress to your body. I love speaking about this, because I talk to so many clients and they're like, oh, I have a cold sore, but like I feel fine. I feel completely fine. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you feel fine, but your body's saying you something. Yeah, it's telling you something different. Yeah. It's telling you to, hey, let's, push back. Let's put the brakes on. Let's, maybe stop dieting for a little bit. Maybe, stop the exercising every day and listen to what your body actually needs. And I think that's very important, that our listeners understand that there's a place for dieting and there's also a place for over exercising. And like you said, stress comes in various ways, and it can't always just be looked at as a negative thing, because it can be a positive thing as well.
Absolutely. And there's do you watch Friends?
Yes, love Friends.
Okay. I always have this thing because I'm like, I will say a Friends quote almost every day. And if you don't watch Friends, I'm like, can we really be friends? You don't get me. But there's a episode where Phoebe has the smoke detector and it's constantly beeping. So she just takes it out and she wraps it up and she like throws it in the garbage chute. And I love that scene because that's what we do in today's day and age. We take out the smoke detector, which is designed to tell you there's smoke, there's something going on, there's a problem that needs to be fixed. But in today's day and age, we are so focused on diet culture and, that we're not good enough. So we work harder, we're constantly bombarded with stress, that we've taken that smoke detector out of our body because our body, believe it or not, has natural things to keep us lean. It has natural signals that we're supposed to listen to, but because we've been in diet culture for so long, we've taken that smoke detector out and we've put it in the drawer. And I was saying, because I was trying to gain weight for my community of girls so I could document the fat loss, and that's been really interesting because if I put my calories up, my energy just went up. So I was stepping more, moving more. Bill was like, babe, like go for a run. Like I'm like this, like a puppy dog. But then if I bring my calories down, I move less. And that's my intuitive eating, because I can listen to what my body wants. And like you said, if we're getting cold sores and we're getting PMS issues and we're getting irregular periods, or it might look like a lack of energy, we're so used to suppressing that and ignoring that and just battling on. So we keep sleeping 6 hours, we keep doing the deficit, and we've become this we've got this inability now to interpret the messages that our body is trying to say. And I think a really big learning curve is to get back to reconnecting to your body. And that's one thing that we both are so big on teaching women is re-listen to your body. That is how you're going to stay lean. That is how you're going to get optimal health of waking up with energy. My clients are like, how do you do so much? I live in optimal health and listen to my body. And I think in saying that as well, metacognition is really important, because a lot of the time we self-sabotage because of the inner voice in our head. And that's the thoughts we have. And what metacognition is simply thinking about your thoughts, bringing awareness to your thoughts. And if we can learn, I like to call it the monkey mind, if we can learn how to control that inner voice in our head, life becomes easier, because you don't just react to everything. You don't just believe all your thoughts. So you won't just be like, oh, I feel fat, and then you believe you're fat, and then you might self-sabotage and go eat a pack of donuts. So I think it's really important to be able to develop the skill of metacognition and be like, okay, I'm fat. And then have a think and be like, am I actually fat? Or is that just something my brain's told me, but it's not factually true? Because your thoughts are not true. It's a thought. And so I think metacognition is another thing that women need to learn and understand as well.
So true. I love everything about that. And intuition is the biggest thing for women. That's a superpower.
Yeah.
Men don't have, or they do have intuition, but not as strong as women. And absolutely. I think that's something that many women don't value enough, or they're just not aware of it enough. And as you grow older, from a teen, like again, from a youngster into a kid, teenager, and becoming a woman in your adulthood, you start becoming more aware of it, because your brain changes as you're getting older. But yeah, when it comes down to intuition, it's very important for women to understand that they need to listen to what the body needs, even though they think they want to diet. Maybe it's not the best time to diet. Maybe you do need to take a break and, just focus on other stuff in life right now. Look at us right now. Like, some of us are locked down during COVID. It's not, ideal for many of us to be dieting. Focus on the other stuff that keep you happy and, bring love to your life, instead of just solely just focusing on the way you're looking. Maybe it's, getting a new hobby, or studying something new, or spending more time with loved ones. Like, there's so much out there that so many of us predict that we're just going to get the happiness from just the way we look.
Yeah. And I think a really good point on that is, ask yourself, how often do you diet? Do you spend majority of your year dieting? And my last deficit was in 2017. So it was going on 5 years. So I've basically been at maintenance, and keep in mind, like I've built my calories up. So I'm eating 3,000 calories a day. But because what I have that intuitive eating and understand to listen to my body, I can maintain that, and my body rarely fluctuates. Given if I might be stressed, it might go up, and then my stress comes down, it comes down. But even touching on intuition, because I think this is a huge one. Our dream is to be able to have intuitive eating. Anyone I speak to, they don't want to follow a meal plan. They don't want to have to track. And I think it's really important to chat about how do we get to intuitive eating, because we can't get there straight off the bat, because one big thing is our perception of healthy eating. And our perception of healthy eating doesn't mean it's the right thing, because I think back, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and my perception was low carbs. No carbs was healthy. No fat, yeah. Exactly. And I was barely eating. But in my head, I was like, yeah, I eat really healthy. And it's really common. I see this a lot with my clients. When they first start, they're like, yeah, no, I eat really clean. And it'll be like 2 boiled eggs in the morning, a salad at lunchtime, and sometimes they don't have dinner, or it might be just a salad for dinner. So they'd be lucky to be getting 1,000 calories. But in their mind, they're perceptually eating healthy. But it's about investing into education, so your perception of health is factual and works for your body. And I get another exercise I get my clients to do is, okay, let's track, listen to your body. And at the start, it might be they end up eating 1,000 calories. Protein will be below like 80 grams, for example, per day. Their carbs will either be on excess on the higher end, or it'll be no carbs. Very rarely is it in that optimal range. So we can't always rely on our body to intuitively eat if we're not in optimal health yet, because our blood sugar might be high, and that means we crave more sugars. And again, we might not have the education to interpret what our body wants. So if anyone is looking to step into intuitively eating, or want to coach their clients to step into intuitively eating, I highly recommend making sure you get the education, spending some time tracking, but then pulling back on tracking. And I know you're huge on this. So stepping into your feminine energy towards food, and not just living in that masculine energy of tracking, because as we know, if we're living in that masculine, we live in a masculine energy world.
We do.
Targets, tracking, macros, calories. And a feminine energy is that intuitively eating we want to get to. It's listening to your body, interpreting those messages. So you want to be able to track to build that knowledge and understanding, and use that as a tool. But then experiment, having days where you can listen to your intuition and then use that as a learning tool, and step more into that feminine energy, and then make an exit plan or an exit strategy to get into more intuitively eating.
Yeah, I love that you highlight that, because so many of us live in this masculine energy, and you know what? It's not our fault. It's society. That's what we've been brought up with. It's like, even from like a really young age at school, you have to do your homework, you have essays, you have assignments, you have deadlines, you have rules, it's just like constant, like go, where for some of us who are not tapped enough into our feminine energy, we feel trapped, we feel exhausted, we feel tired. When I used to work in corporate and sales 9 to 5, that used to like drain my energy. Like I love to just wake up in my own time, not having an alarm clock, just wake up, do my thing, and then go into my day of work. And that comes back to nutrition. As you mentioned, you do have to start from the education side of things. So if you haven't tracked before, maybe you do need to dabble into that a little bit to have an understanding of what's lacking. As you mentioned before, you may be lacking in amino acids, you may be lacking into essential fatty acids that most of us don't have enough of, and that could be a lack of the nutrition. And then from there, backing off, maybe it's a day off of no tracking, and just going with the flow, trusting in your body. And I think that's very important, because many of us don't trust ourselves, and that's a big lack as a woman as well. It goes back to your intuition. How many times do you hold yourself back from doing something, because you're just scared of not doing it, like going to this fear of the unknown. But that goes back to the nutrition. If you have this fear of what's going to happen, you're just never going to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a whole thing on that self-belief and, I'm working on this module around like confidence, self-belief, believing in yourself. And a big part of that is understanding, that inner voice, that inner critic that we talk about, but it's also understanding how the brain works in terms of why are we so wired to think negative about ourselves, about other people? And, think back to hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Yes, we are designed to look for fears, look for threats. So part of we look around the world or what's around us visually, and then those messages go to the hippocampus, and the hippocampus basically tells us, okay, is it a threat? Is it, we see cars coming past. Are we going to get hit? Are we going to get run over? We don't live in a world where we're being chased by tigers anymore, but we still have that critical aspect to our thought process. And this is why we are wired to look at negatives and threats, because now we look on social media and the threats might be comparison. We get work email and a threat might be an email from our manager. I'm not doing good enough. And then that message gets sent to the amygdala, and the amygdala is full of templates, and it will look at all your past experiences, and then it will dictate your action. So let's use dieting as an example. Already when, 9 times out of 10 when girls start with me, they're already negative towards themselves, knowing, I don't think I can do it. And I hear that so often. I don't think I can do it. I've never been able to do it before. I've only been able to do it for, 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and I regain the weight. And again, if you think about that process of the brain, the message has gone to the hippocampus, and then it goes to the amygdala, and you're like, done a diet before, it failed, and I gained weight. So now your experience is off that. So you're going to go into that with a negative mindset. So what's really important, and again, it's that inner voice we need to listen to. Name it if you need to. Mine's called Daisy. And let me tell you, Daisy can be a bitch. She is awful. She's someone who's like, you're not smart enough. You're not good enough. She was the one that used to tell me I was too fat. Even when I was a teeny tiny little human, I was still too fat. So I could never please her. And it's called like the monkey mind. And you actually see that picture in the back. I love that, because it's like, it's a picture, for those who can't see, of a gorilla or a monkey, and it's got headphones on. And the reason I love this is because it's silencing that monkey mind. And that's what we want to do. We want to learn how to control Daisy, or whoever your character in your head is, because we need them. They're there for survival. They're the ones that will react. If we're getting attacked by a polar bear, they will react and sense us into the sympathetic state, the fight or flight, before we can actually understand what's happening, that there is a polar bear coming towards us. We've sensed it. We've heard the footsteps, and our brain, that monkey in the brain, has sent our body into that reaction state. So we need that inner voice, but it's gone loose. Your monkey has gone wild in your brain for so long. Now it takes over, and it's in that position where now whenever you want to do something, it's like, you can't do that. And I can't tell you the amount of things I self-sabotaged. I withdrew from experiences because I didn't feel good enough. Because again, I failed in the past, and my brain always relates to that. And then I don't feel good enough. That monkey mind cements that. And that's a template that I've saved in my brain. And that's what we go through. So understanding how the brain works is the first thing to be able to rewire that process. So you can start thinking more positive, and then belief comes, confidence comes, and then you start to believe in yourself that you can achieve things.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating process. And once you see that transformation within yourself, you just know it's doable. And then you can, if you're a coach, for those who are listening, you can apply that to your clients as well, and, lead them the way that you learned it as well. And I think that's the best way of us teaching it and embodying it to ourselves, and letting clients know that, hey, I've done that, you can do it too.
Absolutely. And we're not perfect. Like, both of us have days, and I reach out to you and I have my days where, I don't feel optimal. But again, I know my tools that I have. I reach out to my friends. I have my accountability friends who I'll message when I am feeling suboptimal, when I might not be having the greatest day. I reach out to them, and then I know how to fill my cup up. So that is health. We remove the expectation. It means that we're all positive and bubbly every day, and we don't have any problems. Like, That world doesn't exist, but we're so self-aware that even on our low days, we know how to pick ourselves up so it doesn't turn into a spiral.
Mm. Can you think of a time that you may have been in a certain spiral?
Oh, yes. Look, I think before I started learning about the brain, it was when I started learning about the brain, I could know my spirals happening. So, you know, I can even think of a recent example where I prevented a spiral. So a few weeks ago, and you know all about this, so I had a loss in the family. And previously that would have been a spiral for me because we had a trigger. And this is very common because in our today's world, we feel like we can only be healthy when our world is perfect. As soon as we get a stress, i.e. might be like a pandemic, or it might be a work stress, or, you know, one of the kids got sick. As soon as something disrupts our perfect routine, everything of your health goes into a negative domino effect. So previously, if I had a stress, it would have been like, can't think of an example at the top of my head, but say, you know, back in corporate work, you know, there'll be moments when my work was extremely stressful. So then it was like, I got home, would walk past Coles and be like, that voice in my head, it's called the permissive voice, where I've been really good all day, restricting my food. And then I walk past Coles and that voice is like, oh, you've had a really stressful day. You just start on Monday, like you deserve it. And then I'll go into Coles on Elizabeth Street, opposite Flinders Street Station on the way home, and I'd buy a pack of the chocolate triple choc cookies from Coles, if you know it. Oh my God.
They're so delicious.
Yeah, I have to avoid them because that's my kryptonite. But I would demolish a pack of them easily, and then I'll have some more. But that's example of how it would spiral. And then I'd feel like so crap about myself. And then the next day I'd feel like shit. And then I would most likely have the whole weekend off my health. Yeah, which is very common because we're in this crazy world where we take time off health. And then I'm like, I'll start again Monday. And that cycle happens so much whenever I had triggers. And, you know, a positive example of this was, you know, a few weeks ago when we had the loss in the family, instead of me being like, oh, the whole weekend's ruined, I made my non-negotiables, and I like to call these my parachute packs. And this is something I do teach I was about to say my kids, my clients. How much I look at them as cute as my children. I don't have kids, but my clients, I teach them about the parachute pack, which is a big believer in health isn't a switch where you turn it on and off. It's a dial. We turn it up and down. So in that instance where I had that stress in my family, I had to turn that dial down a little bit for that, you know, day and a half. I wasn't able to get my steps in. I made sure my non-negotiable was getting 4,000 steps for that day. My non-negotiable was having 3 good meals as opposed to my usual 4 plus snacks, 3 good meals. And my non-negotiable was doing a 5-minute meditation compared to my usual, you know, 20-minute meditation and journal. Those were my non-negotiables. I pulled out my parachute pack for the Thursday, Friday. And then once my life came back to sort of normality, I wasn't out of the habit. I still had the habit there. I just turned it down. I turned it back up. So my steps went back up to 8 to 10. My meditation went back to 20. But that was me getting on top of the spiral, because it could have very easily been to, oh, can't get my steps in, can't eat well, have to eat packaged food. And I have like frozen packs of prepared meals in the freezer just for that, because I can't tell you a perfect week I've had. I've never had a perfect week. Something's always happened. So it's about knowing your triggers, being organized, having some, you know, meal preps in the freezer, sorry, if you have you know, situations that might come up, at least you've got, you know, freezer meals there, good to go. It's going to nourish you, and learn to adapt. So it's about, you know, learning to, it's okay if our steps have to go down. Doesn't mean you have to, say, for example, a car, if we burst one tire, does not mean you need to burst 3 tires or pop 3 tires, because what's going to get you further? You repair the 1 tire and then keep going on your journey. Or if you deflate 4, you're kind of screwed. So you're not going to be getting anywhere. You kind of have to go back to the start. So that's an example of how I used to trigger learning to a spiral compared to now, identify the trigger, pull out that parachute pack, and sort of stay on top of it. And you know firsthand, because I always like message you, you know, how I'm doing, and yeah, I've got to focus back on my sleep now, and all this stuff that we teach our clients, we do. So yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, we don't just educate our clients about that. We we talk, we walk the talk or talk the walk.
Walk
I can't
the
even
walk,
remember.
walk the talk.
Yeah. Both. I'll go with both. But I really love that you mentioned how it's just dialing it up and down. It's not the switch on and off. And that's really important for our listeners to understand that not every day is going to be perfect. And like you mentioned, your weeks are not perfect. My days are not perfect. Like before we jumped onto this call, I was ready to record this episode in my office. And then next door, they started to do work on the next door fence, and we could just hear the drilling. So I had to, just adapt, move my stationery to the living room and go with it. You change slight things around, and it's going back to your nutrition as well. And some days you'll have good days, some days you'll have off days.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I think it really is that metacognition. I think that's going to be the key takeaway here, because a big part of why we have these actions that don't align with our goals is because we react to our thoughts. Because for example, I'm stressed, I eat, or I'm frustrated, I eat, or whatever it might be. I'm tired, I'm going to sit on the couch. So we react to our thoughts so subconsciously. And this is all part of the striatum in that house I was mentioning before, that we need to bring awareness to our thoughts and learn how to control them. And this is why I'm huge on meditation. And there is a lot of resistance, and I get a lot of clients that say, oh, it's not for me. Like, I can't do it. And look, coming from someone like I suffer from, ADHD. It's worse when I was a child. I can manage a lot more now. But if I can learn to do it, believe me, ladies, you can too. I can't express that enough. But it's learning how to control your thoughts so you're not reacting to everything. So for example, your example before, when we started hearing the drilling, reaction might have been, oh my God, why me? Why now? This isn't fair. Victim mentality versus, well, great. Well, that sucks, but okay, let me just go into the other room. So you're not reacting emotionally, but you're coming proactive and being like, okay, well, out of my control, can't really go over there and demand that they stop. So I'll just go into another room. So you've allowed that thought process over the event and then made a decision. And it's a lot more positive compared to feeling frustrated and anger and sad and all of that as well.
Yeah, you've pretty much nailed the head. Nailed.
We're doing great with our sayings.
I know. I'm really bad with my sayings.
Hammer the nails on the head? No.
Yeah.
Nailed the hammer on the head. I actually don't know.
You just concluded that really well.
Okay, yeah. Let's maybe give up on our sayings.
You concluded that very, very well. Before we finish up, to be honest, I don't have anything else, because you've literally covered everything that I wanted us to chat about. But is there anything else that you wanted to conclude with for our listeners today?
No, I think we've covered a lot. It was a pretty in-depth conversation about a lot of things, but I guess to recap, it's about that metacognition, learning how to control your thoughts. I think that's a really key takeaway. I also think another key takeaway is learning how to build habits and try and understand, visualize your striatum being a house and what's inside that house, because are all those things that you're doing subconsciously serving you? And then be aware so you can start changing them. And I think the other key takeaway is how much of your day is the monkey on the sympathetic state, and how can we pull the monkey back to that parasympathetic state, because that's going to help you so much, whether you've got health issues, binge eating, and a lot of those sort of symptoms. So yeah, they're probably my few key takeaways from this conversation.
Love that. And before we go, where else can our listeners find you?
Well, I suck because I don't have a website, but I have one coming. I'm so excited. It's been a long time coming. So on social media at the moment, just on Instagram at Laura Morel Wellness. My friend and I also have a podcast called 2 Peas in a Podcast. And that's basically where no topic is off conversation. So we just talk about everything and anything. But my main way to find me is just on social media on Instagram.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Laura.
Oh, you're welcome.
It.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please don't hesitate to give the Women's Fitness Academy a review or even screenshot today's podcast and tag us to let us know how you found it. Until next time, I hope you all stay well, hydrated, and nourished.